to the Chief Science Officer's Zoom In on Science calls, where we learn about STEM professionals and their careers to understand the impact of their job in modern life. I am C.S. Odonia from Sonora, Mexico. I'm personally excited to host today's call, so for all of us to enjoy this experience, please mute your microphones and post your questions at any time during the presentation in the chat. We will be sure to have time after the slides to answer as many as possible. On past calls, we have learned a lot of different things ranging from the impact of Minecraft in your brain, research on ocean creatures and whale poop, which is what we're going to talk about today, and ways to incorporate STEM in our daily life. To keep us engaged and learning while we're all quarantined, today we welcome back to Zoom In on Science, Charles Rolsky, or Charlie Rolsky, right? You like Charlie better? Okay.
Sure, yeah, I'll take Charlie.
The Director of Science, North America for Plastic Oceans International and PhD candidate, at Arizona State University Biodesign Center for Environmental Health Engineering. That's a mouthful.
Sorry, I know, it keeps getting longer. I can't avoid it.
So Charlie, can you tell our participants a little bit about yourself and your work?
Absolutely. So you nailed most of it there on the head, but I study plastic pollution and I dress as a shark. So I didn't know if that was obvious or not by this. And oh, you can close it? What? Game changer. Look at, I should have done this ahead of time so I could have spoken like this. Anyways, I study marine plastic pollutions and specifically microplastics, which are really small plastic pieces. And they're very dangerous. They're able to reach the bottom of the ocean. They're able to stay on the top of the ocean. They're able to get in our food if we're eating a lot of seafood. So I am heavy into plastic pollution research, and I am a big fan of marine biology. As I said, I'm a PhD student studying plastic pollution. Now, I live in Arizona. Arizona does not border the ocean. So I like to go out and explore the local wilderness. We've got a really cool snake from the Environmental Education Center for the city of Chandler down there. And we've got myself and a collaborator at the top right there. We are noodling for mud turtles. It's probably not a term you've ever heard. Noodling means feeling around for a hole or a burrow with your foot. And then as soon as you find one, you jam your arm in to try to pull out the turtle. We do that a lot if we're trying to get an idea as to how many animals are in a given ecosystem. But who would have thought Arizona had turtles? We do. It's awesome. Bottom right, I like to do a lot of outreach. That's me with the Girl Scouts of Arizona. And what they were doing was working on a law that would ban people from releasing balloons into the air, which is really great. And I think we're close to that now being, put forward, and it would basically fine people for these large releases that end up in a lot of really delicate ecosystems, the ocean included. So I really like local Arizona organisms. I love going out looking for snakes. I love going out looking for birds. Arizona has a lot of cool research. So as I said before, the first thing I'm going to show you is my lab. That's Tucker. He is a black lab. If you haven't met him before, he is the amazing poop sniffing killer whale rescue dog. That's him with a nice killer whale there in the background. We use Tucker by training him. Another great, reason to have rescue animals. But Tucker was trained to smell killer whale poop so we could learn about their health without stressing them out. Because if you get really close to them with the boat, it's going to stress them out. If you're doing research on stress, you're just making bad data. So we trained Tucker, and that really gave me some amazing experience, and it was a lot of fun. I got to see killer whales up close, and it was the best probably way to get me into research. But we ended up finding these really small, hard bits in the poop of other marine organisms. So for example, these vials came from the poop of an otter. And we are noticing that otters can be kind of dumb, and they chew on the bottom of docks. And the bottom of docks has styrofoam to keep the docks floating. I don't know why they do that, but we were learning that they were accidentally eating plastics. And that got us started really trying to understand this relationship. So on the left of that picture, you see that's a plastic before it's melted into a mold. When it's melted into a mold, it looks like that Coke bottle. And then after the Coke bottle ends up in the ecosystem for a long time, it turns into these microplastics. And so we're kind of trying to learn as much about that transition as possible. As I said before, we did this really cool project. That's an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, that went all the way 3,000 feet below the ocean in California off the coast to collect water samples to see if there were plastic fibers or plastics in general. I found a ton of plastic fibers. It was super interesting, but also kind of sad to know that they're going all the way down that far. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give a visual demonstration of how plastics can turn into microplastics. Now, I'm glad you're all sitting down because my abilities to create digital media will leave you like floored. Okay, ready for this? Just take a step back. Okay, I'm going to show you what happens in plastics. Boom, look at that. Okay, sunlight is able to interact with these plastics while they're on the beach, and the sunlight ends up breaking these down. So if you think about yourself on the ocean, on the beach, and you start to get sunburned, plastics have the same kind of thing. Although they don't have skin, they can still break over time. And then on the right, you can see those really accurate looking waves. So the combination of the sun with the waves and kind of pounding over and over again turns these into really small plastic pieces. This is a picture that was actually sent to me by someone who's been supporting our research. You've got sort of fragments of plastic in there, and you've also got these sort of small circular clear ones. I don't know if you guys can see those. There's these really round, small white pieces. And the scary thing about that is that if you look at the picture on the bottom, where the pre-production plastic, we call those nurdles, those little round things, those are the same types of plastics. So we're finding plastics that are basically not even being molded in anything yet. We're finding them in the ocean as trash. So what happens is they're found in the beach sand. Sometimes they'll develop kind of a relationship with algae, and then the algae makes them smell good. So they work their way up the food system or the food chain. Small organisms will eat the plastic. Those are actually fluorescent particles inside of a shrimp. A bigger animal will consume the shrimp. An even bigger animal will consume the fish. And then eventually they poop out what they were eating. We find a lot of plastics, which are really scary. This was a big question for us. That killer whale is 32 feet large sometimes. 32 feet is huge. A great white shark is like 17 feet. So we're almost talking twice the size. This is why it was so interesting, because something that small in that guy's hand should not be in an organism that's 32 feet long. So this is the type of research that kind of helped us to learn, how is it ending up in the stomach of this 30-foot animal? The kind of gross thing about it is the killer whales where I was working, they only eat Chinook salmon. And here's a recipe for Chinook salmon. So we have to have this kind of better idea. You know, we have to see something in the ocean and think, yeah, okay, it might be bad for killer whales, but we're also eating this stuff too. And I don't want any microplastics in the food that I'm eating. I don't know about you guys, that doesn't sound that appetizing to me. Something I wanted to talk also briefly about, we didn't talk about before, plastic recycling. Recycling by itself is not a bad thing. You take something and you turn it into something, you know, in our minds, like a Coke can becomes a Coke can. The problem with plastic is that it's really difficult to recycle. And what happens over the course of a day, it's really hot in Arizona. If I put 4 water bottles in the recycling bin over the course of the day, 3 of them will go to a landfill and only 1 actually goes to a recycling plant, just because these the plants themselves there's so much plastic trash there. And then what happens is that one that goes to the plastic recycling center gets turned into something of lesser value. It doesn't become a bottle, it becomes something like plastic hairs, or it contributes to like clothing. And that starts that whole cycle again of the fibers ending up in the ocean. So recycling with plastic right now, we just need to be sort of avoiding it and not necessarily focusing so much on recycling. We can't be sending so much stuff their way. We also, and this is really important for you guys that are up and coming in STEM and working towards, you know, a future with plastic. We see these images and we have really negative feelings. I'm sure all of us have a negative feeling when we look at this. We see a seabird with bottle caps in its stomach. We see the contents of, I think it was like 30 or 40, something like that, plastic bags that would pull out of the stomach of a dead whale. We've seen animals entangled in plastic trash. Dr. Figner, who was on the other day, shot a video pulling a straw out of a sea turtle's nose. We see these things and they make us sad. And this is important for us to look at. It's important to show people because they come from stuff that we might not necessarily have a negative reaction to. We see the water bottle and we think, oh, you know, there's a water bottle. Or we see the bag. We see the can liner there. We see the straw. So we have to train our minds when we have a negative reaction to these things in nature. We need to have a negative reaction to them at the store. Now, I will say with the pandemic, I'm backing off a little bit when it comes to single use, because right now it's really hard to use reusable bags. But moving forward, you know, it's once everything kind of dies down, we can then go back to this lifestyle where we're not using as much plastic. The great thing about all these things is that they're easily replaceable. You can get a reusable water bottle. You can get a reusable bag, again, when things calm down a little bit. 6-pack carriers can be cardboard instead of being plastic. And then you can use a reusable mug. You can use a reusable straw. These are all items which aren't too expensive and would just save, if we all use these, it would save a ton of plastic trash from ending up in the ocean. Now, I kind of mentioned it before, but, and I know this slide's probably gonna be similar for some of you, it is important while we're at home to stay active as possible. I love this website, explore.org. That sea lion beach, that orca lab, that's up in Canada. Killer whales are known to pass by that fairly often, especially because you can check online to see if they're in the area. From my desk, I can take a screenshot of whenever I see a dorsal fin. I can send that to the orca lab and say, these are the guys that went by today. And then they can say, oh, great, thank you so much. We were wondering if they were in the area, because they can identify them. It's an awesome website, whether you're interested in the ocean, the rainforest, the desert. They have a bunch of live cams on that you can tune into and watch a lot of really cool stuff. There are also really cool things like virtual marine biology field camp. I want to do this as an adult. I know it's for kids, but I would absolutely do a virtual marine biology field camp. That is the coolest thing I've ever heard. I just have to say it one more time, virtual marine biology field camp, awesome. Lots of these are available online and through different organizations. And it's stuff like this that, again, can kind of keep you active, make sure that you're creating better skills. You know, I'm biased because I favor the ocean, so all these are going to be kind of ocean related suggestions. Bird watching is a big deal. If you can set some seed out safely, if your parents can set some seed out safely, the best whale watchers are really good bird watchers. It's all about kind of taking a picture of what's in front of you at a given time and just notice what's normal, what is going on right now. And then as soon as you see some sort of change, like sometimes you'll see a spout or a dorsal fin, or you'll see movement of feathers, your mind kind of hones in on it, and then you can develop your skills of identifying, oh, what kind of bird it was. This is a cardinal. What kind of cardinal is it? You know, and then you can get a bird book. I love bird watching. I do it all the time. And if you're safe, you can actually, you know, go out in your car and not have to interact with anyone and go to certain places and watch birds, as long as you're safe. And then there are quite a few nature books, which I have, my desk right now is covered in nature books in the other room, because I love reading about this stuff. I love learning about it. There's a lot of cool experiments you can do at home. There's a lot of cool research you can do with the internet, trying to learn about your favorite animal. If I could speak to myself at your guys' age, I would, you know, young Charlie would say, I like the ocean. And then, you know, if I could talk to him, I'd say, okay, cool, but what? What about the ocean do you like? Do you like whale poop? Do you like seagulls? What do you know, like, what's interesting? And then I can sort of start thinking to myself, I really like dolphins and killer whales. Why? Well, let me learn something about them, you know, and creating this kind of momentum that, again, this is all stuff that's going to keep us active and to keep our minds going. So if you combine all these things on the screen, and there's so much more out there, you will emerge from this that much smarter, that much better, that much more well-equipped to take on the world, take on the ocean, you know, and we'll all join together in doing so. So I'm not just recommending these things, I am doing most of these things at this very moment. So as soon as I finish with you, I'm gonna check what birds are outside. I'm gonna check Sea Lion Beach, see if any killer whales are there. You can check with me, you know, we can both be doing it at the same time. Super interesting. That being said, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. I know we had quite a few last time, and I see now in the chat that there are quite a few as well. So I would love to get to some questions and have a little discussion.
So thank you very much for telling us about your work. And it's very evident you're very passionate about the ocean, with big emphasis in killer whales, I think, and sharks, because, well, don't know why. Why did I catch that of the shark?
I have no clue. It is beyond my knowledge.
So while we were learning about what you do, participants have left questions in the chat. But let's start with some questions I had prepared. The first one, what is your favorite part about being out on the ocean?
My favorite part about being on the ocean is the unknown of what is underneath me and what is around me and what species are all over the place. You could be sitting on a boat kind of minding your own business, and all of a sudden a huge humpback whale surfaces right next to you and goes back down. It's just a complete unknown. I have no idea what's underneath me at a given time and trying to figure that out. So we'll even get like a hydrophone sometimes, which records underwater sounds. You can stick it in the water and not hear a thing. Other times you can stick it in the water and hear 30 killer whales going by, their clicks, their whistles, their calls. So just the pure fascination with what's underneath me is one of my favorite things about being in the water.
I think that's the scary part for me.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There's a lot you have no idea. Like if you're swimming and something touches you, it could be a megalodon or it could be seaweed. And in your mind, it's usually a megalodon, but it's most of the time, well, they went extinct. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's the unknown is scary.
I don't know how you like it so much.
It's once you sort of like once I started scuba diving, something that you guys can do when you get a little bit older. You kind of realize that when you're in this ecosystem and it is kind of scary, everything kind of just accepts you. They look at you like you're kind of a weird looking seal that's hurt or weird and strange looking, but you're cool and we're cool with you. And you just kind of, it's this feeling of acceptance, and it's really neat. You can just look at the, 30 feet down, look at a piece of coral, and there's so much activity in this little space. There's crabs, there's shrimp, there's fish, and it's so neat. And so I think it would be scary if you got in and immediately you were attacked by like a tiger shark. But most of the time that never happens. It's always a pretty nice experience.
Okay. The second question, what advice would you give to your 14-year-old self?
Listen to your mom and do volunteer opportunities and do internships and anything you really can to get experience. I started volunteering at an animal hospital, I think I was 15 or 14. And then I volunteered at a bird of prey rehabilitation center on the weekends. I'd go up and help clean the cages of hawks and owls, and we'd do releases. I ended up getting a job at an animal hospital, but all of these things, when it came to me applying for internships later on down the road, they all helped me get an internship pretty easily because it separated me from everyone else. So if I was talking to myself, I would say, look at what's out there and build your resume and start doing interesting things, start developing skills, and it'll help later on down the line.
So CSO Josh from Arizona, is it true that pollution is going down during the coronavirus pandemic? If so, why?
It's a really great question, really, really good. So we have to kind of classify what type of pollution we're talking about. If we're talking about maybe the pollution from cars, then certainly you can make the case if people are staying inside that there's less cars on the road, so there's less air pollution, which is great. But I'm noticing when I'm walking to and from like the dumpster outside or whatever, I've seen a lot more gloves and I've seen a lot more masks, and there's quite a bit more single-use plastic stuff being used, which I get because of the pandemic. So different levels. A lot of people are going out on trails and hiking, and so there's more people, creating maybe disturbances out in nature. There's also maybe more people on the water. If they're on the water, that's creating noise pollution. So we're seeing pollution go down in some cases, and we're seeing it also go up with other types of behaviors. But that's a really good question.
So next question is from CSO International. I think that's Jake. Is there plastic in toothpaste?
Is there plastic in toothpaste? There have been studies done where they found relatively harmful compounds in toothpaste. I don't know if that toothpaste is still being used. I know that they've been phasing it out, but what ends up happening is that we create something that's interesting and it serves a purpose, but then we don't really think about the end of life scenario for that thing. So for example, we used to put antibacterial stuff in soap, and then we'd wash our hands, but then the soap would go down the sink into rivers and lakes, and it would make the shores or the water antibacterial, which is really bad. So there are some cases where the toothpaste had some stuff in it that wasn't as harmful, but to my knowledge, it's not being used nearly as much as it was. But we definitely had microplastics in face wash. I can tell you that much.
Use face wash?
It's not all of it. I think now President Obama put forward a ban on it in cosmetics. So I think for the most part, it's phased out.
Okay. So
wash your face.
CSO Saraya, I don't know how to pronounce that, from Phoenix. Why is it that ever since the coronavirus outbreak that people have started to take care of the pollution and environment?
So when we say take care of the environment or pollution, I guess we're referring to seeing sort of positive things happen as a result of the quarantine. And I think that's just a reflection of the fact that we've all stayed inside, and being inside more has meant, like we said earlier, less pollution, less traffic on the freeways, less stuff in the air. I think we're now realizing too that we do have a relationship with the environment. We do have a relationship with the animals. If we're going too far, if their numbers are getting too low, if climate is changing as much as it has been, we are seeing effects of that, and direct effects. And it's scary in terms of how many, the Amazon being depleted of resources. If we're talking about, how much pollution is being emitted into the environment. These are all things that have consequences. So I think now we're kind of learning, like, wow, our impact on the environment is coming back to us, because look at how our lifestyles have changed so much.
Okay, so CSO Benjamin from Arizona asks, what is the coolest opportunity you've gotten to do in your job?
The coolest opportunity I've gotten to do in my job. That's a really good question. Let me think. I would say right now we just started a research project that was mildly interrupted by current events, but we are now examining the human body for the presence of microplastics. So we're actually looking for plastics in the tissue of people in order to see, because we've learned now that some bottled water can have microplastics and nanoplastics. Nano's even smaller. Some beer, some honey, sugar, or salt. There's all these different things that they're finding little amounts of plastic. So then we thought, let's start looking in the human body. So once things return back to normal, it's going to be a really cool experiment that we've been working on for a long time. Out and about, I always tell the story, but seeing the carcass of a porpoise next to the boat after a killer whale had grabbed its tail and just basically shook it to get the skin off and then eat all the blubber, that was pretty sweet. That was really cool. And I saw so many cool animals, between humpback whales and a lot of cool porpoises and dolphins. So being on the water is, anytime you can be out, you're working and you're able to enjoy beautiful places like that. It's a pretty great experience.
Sure.
You don't have to be scared. The ocean is not that scary.
Yeah, you really put it in a good light.
Good. That's why I'm here.
So CSO Marissa from Arizona says, Dr. Christine loved working with sea turtles because of the easiness of field work with them due to their size. What are some struggles you overcome when working with animals as huge as 32 feet?
That's a really, really, really good question. So the biggest struggle that we had is we were allowed to collect poop from the killer whales, but we weren't allowed to get within 200 yards because they're protected, right? So it's a good thing. But kind of navigating that fine line is really difficult. So they'd be swimming one way and we'd kind of come behind them and either, like we call it running transects, where they're going like this and we kind of follow them. And let's say the dog cues, then we think, oh, sweet, let's collect the poop. Let's go, time to, for action. And then they'd turn around and we'd have to go like, oh, this is not good. They're coming back. So we would have to report ourselves for imposing on that 200 yards. And that was really difficult. It was also hard to find them because their availability would be based on their prey. And Chinook salmon are being depleted, and it's a much lower amount of prey than in recent years. So sometimes the killer whales nowadays, they won't even come down from Canadian waters. And every summer we're getting less and less fecal samples because there's not as much food available. And so they're not coming down, to the waters of Washington. And it's really bad because now more than ever, we need data to be collected with them. And I think there's only 72 now, there might be even less. But it's really difficult because you can't get that close. And then if the food's not there, they're not there. And that's another day without data. So there's a lot of challenges when it comes to working with them.
Okay. CSO Austin from Pennsylvania says, besides limit current plastic use, how, if possible, do you extract microplastic particles from the ocean?
So there's a couple different ways. It depends on where you're getting it from. If you're getting it from the water, then you go down with some sort of filter and you run water through it, and you take the filter, you look at it under a microscope. If it's coming from poop, then what we do is we digest it. So we combine poop with something like hydrogen peroxide, which you all probably have in your house. And the hydrogen basically dissolves all of the non-plastic material. And then we can filter what's left, pull it off, and be able to analyze it. It's a lot of times you might think of a science lab as doing all these crazy cool things, and a lot of times they are. But if we're just learning something, I have the poop sample, I have peroxide, I have sort of a heat plate in case I need to warm it up, and I have a sieve or a filter. Very basic stuff I could buy at the store. You know, it's not this crazy NASA looking thing. And then you just kind of play with it and try to figure out which style, which method gives you the best results. And so it basically kind of, just to answer the question, depends on where you're getting the sample from. But if it's poop, it's certainly a challenge. And, you know, I'm sure I'll be getting some poop samples relatively soon. Hopefully it's from an animal that doesn't smell as bad.
I think he was asking from the ocean, not from poop.
From the ocean, so we just filter it. Basically, you have a filter that you use. You let water actively pass through it, or you can kind of scoop water up and shake the remaining water out. And generally, you'll find, you know, plastic floating on the water as well as underneath the waves.
The next question is from CSO Chalet. What is one thing that you've learned in your career that has made your jaw drop?
That's a good question. Jeez. This is good for me because I have to defend my PhD and they're going to be asking a lot of hard questions. So this is my like appetizer for that. That made my jaw drop. I can say that every time we've done sort of an experiment or something exploratory to learn about the health of an animal or the impact of plastic, it's always worse than I expect. It's always, you know, I might think to myself, okay, this sample is going to have 2 fibers. It ends up being like 20. Or it's, you know, it's looking at rates of deforestation, looking at how much, you know, food we're pulling out of the ocean, and all these things end up always being worse than what I thought. And that to me is probably the most jaw-dropping aspect of this, is how bad a lot of these impacts from human beings are now on the ocean, on the planet. And it's not jaw-dropping, that's jaw-dropping in a sad way. I don't know about jaw-dropping in a good way. They all go back to my killer whale study. So I have a really, you know, it's like, I can't not talk about that, which is the most frustrating thing in the world because I like talking about it so much. But one time, I'll tell this briefly, we have these sticks with little buckets on the end. That's how we collect the poop. And the bucket is made out of plastic. Usually it's fastened in pretty well so that once you scoop the poop up, you can take the little container out and hand it to someone behind you. But one time I went to scoop and it fell out. And then I thought, I just contributed to plastic pollution and I'm a horrible person, because it sinks, it fills with water and it starts to sink. So I jumped over and I grabbed it as it was sinking and I was emerged victorious. And then next to me, there was a floating poop sample and it was like the coolest thing. It was like Michael Jordan in my mind, LeBron James. I just reached over and grabbed it and said, here you go. And again, in my mind, that was like the coolest thing I've ever done. In reality, far from it, but that was jaw-dropping in a good way because I went from hating myself for dropping this thing to grabbing it and then getting a poop sample. It was epic.
Okay, so CSO Chalet asked, what do you do at work on a daily basis?
Nowadays, this is my work. This is my office and my lab, because like you guys, I'm sure I'm just trying to stay safe and inside as much as possible. When things come back to normal, as I kind of mentioned before, we're going to be moving ahead with this project examining human tissue for the presence of small plastics. And what that means is as I get to work, I kind of check in, I go right to the lab and start working on, you know, checking my samples. So I've been letting these tissue samples sit overnight to see if we can get them to disintegrate so that we can pull off any type of plastic. And so when I get back to work, we're going to make sure that method is efficient in removing plastic from these samples. And then we're also developing this method to be able to identify the plastics themselves. So once I get back to work, and I'm eager to get back to work, we're basically going to go right back to that project and do some really, really interesting research to see if it's invading our tissues, invading our bodies. But it's a mix of sort of writing papers, writing grants, answering a lot of emails, and a lot of lab work, a lot of coffee, a lot of snacks, that's the highlight of my day, is just what snacks I made. And if I brought good snacks, it's gonna be a good day.
That's something to look forward to.
Yeah, food. Food is the number one. If I have a good lunch, it's gonna be a great day.
So Sia socially asks another question. What's the best career decision you've ever made?
Probably getting involved in internships. I know I keep saying it, but every time I left an internship, it was always an open door to come back. So I did an internship with a Tufts veterinary program, and part of the internship was a rotation under different veterinary fields. And one of them was at an aquarium with a marine vet, which is awesome. So there'll be an otter that's injured somewhere out in the water. They bring it to the vet and he patches it up and they re-release it. Coolest thing ever. So I just did like a brief part of the internship. You go there for half a day and meet the vet and learn about what the vet did. And I got so engaged with this individual that he said, come back and work for me, in the future. And we created this relationship so that I was able to go back and do a specific internship just with him. And it was awesome. So not only does it open doors for a lot of other things around you, but being able to create these connections and these relationships, it's the most important thing for really anyone's career, and it can start at your guys' age, is that early.
CSO Lauren from Arizona asks, what can student leaders such as ourselves do on our campuses to further environmentalism and fight pollution?
It's a very good question. The best thing that you can do is be observant. So look around and what do you see? Do you see a lot of unnecessary plastic waste? Do you see a recycling bin, or is there no recycling bin? Do you see students being aware of their impact in certain areas? Is there a garden? Are there bird feeders? I mean, that's basically in any environment that you're in, whether it's school, whether it's after school programs, what have you. Be observant, and if you notice something, speak up and say something, and you'll create some positive change. There's been schools that I've spoken at where students of your age and younger have come up to me and said, it bothers me that we don't have some sort of recycling program, that all of our waste goes to the landfill. And then so you create that dialogue, and I would always tell them, go to your teachers and go to the staff at your school and ask them how hard it would be to do this. And then sure enough, when I'd go back to give another talk, they'd have recycling areas, they would have a garden, they would have bird feeders. So you can be the change. If you see something that shouldn't be the way it is, or if you see an opportunity for people to learn about something, then be that change, be that opportunity. And you're already off to a good start. The CSO program is phenomenal at what it does, and just keep at that, and keep, being that driving force. And for sustainability, learn new things. What's coming out I feel like every month I'm learning something new about sustainability and how we can be more sustainable. So learn, and then apply it, teach others about it, and have it be like this wildfire that's created of sustainability. And you're already off to a great start, so just kind of keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm so sorry if I mispronounced names. CSO Faria, what other work field would you have enjoyed if you did not get into the ocean or nature?
I don't even want to think about that. See, I thought I had the answer for it because I really like birds and bats. So I was going to say I would be a bird or a bat biologist. But if I didn't get into nature, what would I have done? I don't know. I don't think I could do anything. I was going to say like a park ranger. That's off. Geez. I don't even know. I don't think my existence would be a thing without nature. I think
just give up.
Yeah, I would just sit with my cat. No, I'd work at an animal hospital is not nature. I'd work at an animal hospital, right? I can do that. I'd be a vet. I wanted to be a vet. I would follow through with that. That's as close I want to get to that, because right now I'm just terrified thinking of my life without nature.
So, Tira, throughout your career, is it what you expected, or is it even more? And if so, why and how?
I'm trying to think, maybe the journey what I expected? It's hard. So it's a very tough industry to work in, with science and research, because not only is doing the analysis tough, but then sometimes the data is really hard to understand. And then when you do understand it, sometimes it's really sad. Like they did some really important research off the coast of New England with right whales, which are endangered. And they collected their poop and they found really high levels of contaminants. And many, in some cases, the high level of contaminants were in juveniles, were in babies. And so this is a case where I'm sure going out and collecting the feces, and those waters are rough, is really difficult. I'm sure processing it in the lab is really difficult. I'm sure having the data be understandable is really difficult. And then at the end of that, to learn, like, one of the higher levels of these dangerous pollution is in a baby is like another difficult thing to have to process. And what they ended up learning was that a lot of times the pollution in the water is stored in the blubber of these big marine mammals. They call it lipid soluble. So it basically sits in the blubber, which is almost a good thing because it doesn't affect the animal necessarily directly. But if there's a period of time when the animal is starving, it uses those fat resources to help fuel the body. And then if those fat resources have these contaminants, it can often be transferred through the milk to the baby, to the offspring. So it can be really hard. This whole process is very difficult. The human tissue research I'm telling you about, I thought we would have, you basically create your own method of doing something. I thought we'd have it down in a week. 3 weeks, a month later, we were still working on it. So there's a lot of things that pop up that are difficult, but whenever you're doing something new, it's hard. And that's a good sign. If what you're doing is hard, it's a good sign that you're working on something important. It's a really good question.
CSO Marissa from Arizona says, I tried to start recycling at my school, but due to our location, my principal said it was too expensive and not an option. How can I work around or with no's?
That happens to me a lot of no's. Again, I see no's as kind of struggles. It means that there's an opportunity. I don't see it as a shut door, it's an opportunity. I would start, if it was me, I'd start a club. And I would look into what my school allows for a club. And it would be all about being more sustainable. And then I'd look into, is there money that I can use for running the club? There's opportunities to get money from nonprofits, from a lot of school programs that generate money. And then again, you can kind of be your own driving force. If someone tells you no and shuts the door, then open another one. That's personally what I would do. I get that it's expensive and I understand there are obstacles. So if you don't want to go down that route, then you can focus on looking, like almost creating an inventory of all the plastics that you see at your school and make a rank. What's the most amount of plastic you see? What is it? Is it straws? Is it utensils? And what's the least? And then from there, if you can't recycle, at least you can identify which plastic are we using way too much that we could replace. And then that would be a big benefit to not only the school, because it would save money, but it will also save the environment. So that's a nice way of kind of flipping it around. When I go to businesses, when there's a quarantine and they give me, like a restaurant gives me water with a straw, then I won't say, don't give me a straw because it can come out of sea turtle's nose. I'll say, oh, can you in the future just tell people, if you want a straw, please ask. And then I don't say because of sea turtle, I say because you'll save money. That way you use, less straws. And you could do the similar thing with a school and say, we're using way too much plastic silverware. If we use something else, maybe you guys would save money and we could put the extra money towards recycling or something like that. You just have to get creative.
It's even harsher when it's not even expensive. It's cheap to recycle, for example, in my school, and they don't want to do it. So that's very hard.
You just got to keep trying. There's so many people that I work with that are battling every day, and there's always so many obstacles and so many bumps in the road, but the end justifies all that. And it's so worth it. Never lose sight of what positive impact you're making. Let that kind of fuel you throughout that process.
CSO Justin asks, when you were scuba diving, what is your favorite thing you saw?
I would say, now I haven't been diving in extremely tropical places, which I'm super bummed about right now. I want to go scuba diving in coral reefs in Florida. And I've been scuba diving in California, Washington, New England. Those are all really cool. I would say in California, I was diving with a dive master, and my mom told me later on, I was being followed by a sea lion, where it was literally going like within feet of us as we would kind of go along. And it was just a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful experience because you're in kelp. I didn't have to think about, great whites, because even though they live in the area, they don't like going through kelp. It messes up their sensory stuff. So we're relatively safe, but you're literally just gliding through this kelp forest, and there's all sorts of really neat creatures below you, and there's all sorts of neat creatures above you. And I was being followed by a sea lion, and actually, I probably shouldn't. I think my mom's on, but she doesn't like this story. But as I was swimming at one point, the kelp pulled out my regulator, so the thing that's giving me air, and it was just gone. And so you're kind of, you're 40, 50 feet down without oxygen, but you learn all these techniques. They teach you that if your regulator comes out, you kind of dip down with your arm, you make a sweeping motion, you bring it back up, it goes in your mouth, and it's fine. The slightly scary thing about that was he kept swimming, and I had stopped. So by the time I got everything fixed, I looked up and he was gone. But again, your training kicks in. If I was going south, he'll come back north. We'll keep swimming in the same direction. We'll hit each other. And then ultimately, he didn't fill up the tank enough. So I looked down at my oxygen, and I had pretty much run out. So then but again, training. You say, I'm out of air. Can we share? You do all this underwater. And then they have an extra regulator they put in your mouth. You hold it here, he holds his, and then you do this. You say swim up, so then you swim up together. So just kind of having training kick in is good, and you just have to kind of get suited for that environment. But it was, a lot of cool experiences scuba diving.
So be prepared.
Yeah, you go through a lot of training, and it's all for a really good reason, because when you're down there, we're very out of our elements, and you can't just swim up really quickly. So you have to be, your mind has to be working. You can't panic. You just kind of have to stay calm. But it's a really fun experience, and I encourage you all to look into it. I think you can start at a pretty young age these days with the training.
So you're telling me it's not like the movies?
It is not like the movies, unless the movie showing people getting the bends if they go up too quickly, which is what happens to your lungs. So no, it's really cool. It's an incredible experience, and I highly recommend it. Stuff can go wrong, but again, that's where your training kind of kicks in, and you end up being okay. If I can do it, any of you guys can. That's for sure.
CSO Faria from Arizona asked, how long would you say it took to collect poop?
Good question. So it all is kind of depending on the whales, again, being in the area. I got there, I don't remember when, I want to say May, when I was doing the research, and for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, there were no whales. You wake up every day at 7 a.m., or sometimes earlier, you kind of listen into the boat operators and the people that are doing whale watching, just kind of see if they're going to give any tips. But a lot of times we didn't even see a whale. And then finally we get out there, and the conditions could have been bad, or they could have fled once we got there. We always got reports at our base, but you have to go from the base to the harbor, get the boat ready, take the boat out of the harbor to where the whales are. And by then, unless they're sleeping, they moved on to somewhere else. Sometimes to collect poop, it would just take a week or two even to find the sample. And then once you find the sample, generally you move really quickly, and hopefully, we've done research that suggests that it floats for around 45 minutes. So you got a real narrow window there to collect some poop on the water. But it can take a really long time. It can be very frustrating, but each one is so important that it makes it all worth it, even if it takes a long time.
Last question is from CSO Zariah from Phoenix. Do you scuba dive often? If so, where are your favorite sites to do so?
I wish I scuba dove more often, but it doesn't happen as often as it should. The last time I did it was for this commercial that ASU made, my university made about me. And again, it was a little bit of a it was a really cool experience, because I was with a dive master and a photographer, and I was kind of just treading water, you're kind of just doing this, and they were going down and getting locations to where to shoot. And in the distance, you can hear humpback whales, you can hear their spouts going psh, psh, and you're just kind of hanging out. But then I had some malfunctioning equipment, and ended up having a bunch of stuff come up. But it was a pretty fun experience, and I'd like to do it a lot more in maybe more tropical areas. Usually, if the sun penetrates the water, everything below you is really colorful. Whereas maybe off the coast of Washington, there is a lot of really neat activity, but not as colorful. So I'm definitely looking forward to scuba diving more, and I hope it happens sooner than later.
Okay, so thank you very much. for your participation today. Before we close this call, what advice would you give to us as young leaders for our future?
I should ask you for advice. You guys are the ones that are crushing it right now. You're on an incredible path, and you're part of a program that is so important because you're able to help other people, especially your peers, connect with science. So the path that you're on is phenomenal, and I'm extremely impressed and proud of you guys for the work that you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. If people are saying no, if people are saying it's too expensive to recycle, don't let that stuff get you down. Find other ways around it. Find other ways to solve the problem, because your little movement here is not so little when you zoom out and see the impact that you have on your community, that you have on your peers. I think it's just so important. Women in STEM is crucial these days. Diversifying STEM. It's just, you guys have so much. I'm going to be able to watch you guys for years and all the cool research that you're doing. So keep up with programs like this. Anytime there's a chance to learn, to do an internship, to connect with a professional, absolutely take advantage of that. And it's just such an honor to be around, you guys' inspiring movements and all the actions that you're taking in your community. So keep it up.
Again, we thank you for joining us today, Charlie. Happy 50th anniversary of Earth Day.
You too. Yeah, let's continue to make every day Earth Day.
Yeah. So we hope that you can participate in another call someday and help us continue with Zoom In on Science. Like the motto says, CSOs, don't just hope it happens, make it happen. See you soon.
Love it. Yeah, congrats. All right, talk to you all later.
Hey, Charlie, though, we would like you to go ahead and stay online, but turn sideways and start talking so we can get a good shot of that shark. While everybody on the call, if you would go ahead and, that's so funny, if you would go ahead and unmute, we're going to go ahead and close with our closing of our motto. So as CSO International's Director of Student Success, CSOs, don't just hope it happens.
Make it happen.
Make it happen.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It was incredible to have you on. We appreciate you so much. Your stories are just interesting, and I really commend you for rocking the shark outfit.
Anytime. Thank you guys for giving me a chance to speak with you all, and keep up the great work. It's really awesome to see. In my lab, we'll schedule a meet and greet, and you can see where I work, and we'll have a good old time. A lot of people from Arizona here, so yeah, let's do it.
I really get confused when you talk about lab and lab, because I think you're talking about your black lab, like the dog,
yes,
and then you're talking about your laboratory.
Because that way I can see if one's not available, maybe the other one is. So either way, you can maybe see the lab.
Either way, we're covered.
Yeah, exactly. There will be a lab.
I love it. Well, thank you all, and great job, CSO Danya. You're an excellent host. We'll see you all again soon.
All right, bye, guys. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.